At the time that I'm doing this video, I've put over 150 hours into this game already. Now, before anyone voices concern for my sleep schedule, 150 hours over 12 days actually isn't as significant as it sounds. It's only, let's see, a little over 12 hours a day. Okay, I don't have an Elden Ring problem. Okay? Whether we're focusing on combat, environment design, or world building, Elden Ring has fulfilled and exceeded all of its promises. It's a game that over-delivers in just about every aspect it can, and it outclasses any Souls game FromSoft has ever made. But one aspect that impressed me particularly was the variety of its boss fights. Rarely ever do these bosses feel repetitive, and even recurring encounters like the Crystallians or the Burial Watchdogs have a few different variants, each with their own movesets that require a slightly different strategy. I'm ranking these bosses based off of how fun and memorable they felt to fight, general creativity, maybe how significant their item drops are, as well as just whether or not they're worth seeking out and fighting yourself. On my number 15 spot is the Deathbird. What makes this boss one of the more unique encounters is that you can only access this boss fight during the nighttime. I didn't immediately figure that out, and yes, I feel stupid for it too. And if you feel the exact same way, then hey, join the council. We could be dipshits of the round table together. Having certain encounters only spawning during certain times of day is another addition in Elden Ring that makes the world feel as alive as it does. The design of the boss itself is pretty cool. Its brain skull thing looks like it headbutted itself through a mirror after one too many bad hair days. And the fact that it pretty much feels like you're fighting a reanimated museum exhibit because this thing is practically a giant fossil. Just watch out for the Deathbird's big sister in the mountaintops area, the Rite bird. In case the constant lingering pools of fire it leaves everywhere isn't annoying enough, all of its attacks now deal frostbite damage. Being a fly in Miyazaki's office during this conversation I'm sure would have been a treat. Hey, you remember that kind of memorable but not really bird boss we threw around the game like 4 times? What if we gave it wizard powers and wings made of abyssal space magic? And a shitload of HP. I sat here in this chair for a good 10 minutes in the middle of a moral dilemma of whether or not I should pay lip service to a boss I technically haven't even beaten yet. But this game is 5 days old as I'm typing this, and someone has to pay my student debt. I'm sure the boss gets much easier once you figure out the patterns because, of course, that's how Souls games work. But you'll have to forgive my lack of patience for all the times I tried to roll out of the way and kept getting stunned fucked by the lingering fire on the ground that I could have sworn disappeared 10 minutes ago. I'm surprised some of this shit didn't come with me when I teleported back to the hold. Imagine being a fly trapped in a really small room with a very playful puppy. This is what it feels like to fight the Ulcerated tree spirit. This is one of those fights where I personally believe the hitbox accuracy really shines in Elden Ring. Half of its attacks are liable to fly right above your head if you're close enough to it, and the only attack you consistently have to worry about is when it takes an inhale and starts breathing piss fire down on the floor. You have the option to fight one of these things extremely early if you use a stone sword key on the gate next to the stranded graveyard grace, but there's some pretty complex and also pretty terrifying platforming you have to do to get there. The game is nice enough to place a stake of Marika right before the boss door, but make sure you're prepared to take it down because readjusting your equipment means respawning at the last site of grace and taking the whole trek back down once again. Your internal monologue will take over and you'll start thinking of all the preparations you could have made, but the stubborn side of you is like, nope, I'm not walking back all the way down here. This fucker's dying right now. This boss is also the owner of one of the most broken strategies out there for any boss. Staggering it during its transition into phase 2 can freeze the AI for a whole 8 seconds before it wakes up and starts attacking again. If you're strong enough, you can easily kill it or bring it near death during this time. On my number 13 spot is the Valiant Gargoyle fight. A lot of people may not share my opinion on this one because these end up being treated as basic ass enemy encounters the game just expects you to deal with in the late game. Fighting one gargoyle isn't that exciting for the most part. You're basically clashing with one of the Blackblade Kindred's distant cousins that doesn't give a shit about his physical health and only shows up to family reunions to eat all the chips. The fight suddenly becomes 10 times more exciting when Miyazaki looks down and yells, "Hey, boner breath." Yeah, there's 2 of them now. Fight 2 of them because I fucking said so. If you withhold your spirit summon until the second gargoyle and then call forth the ancestral arrow spam machine, it can actually turn into a pretty fun 2v2. Sadly, I didn't get to experience this phase for long because I was so over-leveled for this fight that they were only both in play for a grand total of 7 seconds, but I guess that's another one on my list I can come back to in the next run. Next up on the list is Blackblade Kindred. I don't know what it is about everyone in Elden Ring taking an entire human lifespan just to swing a goddamn weapon, but no one stands as a better example of that than the Blackblade Kindred. You can spend as long as you want grinding for levels, but the only way to reliably put these guys down is to just get to work and start memorizing those attack patterns. I would not recommend going after these guys before you've at least reached Leyndell, and even then most of their attacks are capable of two-shotting you no matter what level you are. The one you fight in Caelid is somewhat cheesable if you play play around the two platforms beside the staircase due to the boss AI shitting itself whenever it has to walk on something more complicated than a flat surface. You'd think this thing would have trouble keeping itself upright with all the leg days it's neglected, so any reason it can keep up with Torrent is one that goes far above my head. There are no heroes when it comes to this boss, but only a coward would catch him taking a cozy nap and shove a comet of light up his ass Soulstream style. Yeah, you can probably one-shot anything with this as long as you have the right build and the boss is a heavy sleeper, but if you do that, you miss out on an otherwise pretty fun fight once you get the patterns down. And they drop some pretty dank weapons too, which is always a plus. Taking the number 11 spot is Mohg, Lord of Blood, an optional demigod boss that spends half his time in the fight giving you one of the saddest attempts at a Beyblade attack I think I've seen so far. He really does try to spin to win like the pros, but runs out of juice after the second swing. It's like watching someone trying to start a lawnmower. Most of his moves are kinda cool on their own, but they savor of anticlimax once you remind yourself you're fighting one of the game's feared demigods. This dude's palace has enough cheap garbage in it for me to fill a notebook on why blood loss is a bullshit fucking status ailment, so when Mohg decides to use that ailment as a gimmick, it gets a little under my skin, no pun intended. It's not like the game is keen on hiding it or anything, it's in the dude's name. You knew the box you were opening with this dickhead as soon as you laid eyes on the blood moat surrounding his castle, and the fight is still pretty fun. His attacks actually take some timing to dodge through, and the one move where he reaches through a portal and pops an ethereal pimple that spews fire, that one's pretty neat. That one's cool. I don't know, it's just sort of weird to see a demigod boss where the coolest thing that happens is you shotgunning your flask like an insecure frat boy because you thought you were too good for that crystal tier in the second Church of Marika that walkthrough told you to get. His second phase gets slightly more interesting because his melee swings have cool red tints to them now, but his moveset doesn't ever radically change. Don't get me wrong, it's on this list for a reason. It's still a pretty badass fight, but I don't know, man. Considering his status, this one felt kind of underwhelming. The full-grown Fallingstar beast is a full-grown pimple rubbing against my inner thigh during basketball practice. This is one of those bosses that just don't really care what level you are. It's still gonna two-shot you with its giant spiky tail and then proceed to finish whatever combo it was busy doing breakdancing on your corpse while you're just trying to respawn. It does everything from fire magic beams from its centipede-looking head all the way to anti-gravity spells that would have been a nice drop from this guy, but all you get instead is part of its face as a cool halberd-looking weapon. Still, this beast is quite marvelous to fight, even if you're riding around on poor Torrent here, discovering all the ways it can kill you. Forgive me if I'm not exactly too enthralled about fighting a rock with a pair of scissors for a face. I'm sure there's another joke there about rock beating scissors, and maybe this dick munch will have his combo finished by the time I actually find it. I wrote this whole paragraph like I hate this boss, and I guess part of me does, but there's a much larger part of me that thinks it feels cool jumping over its charge attack, and if you teach your dumb baby brain not to roll spam every time it slams its tail down, dodging through the combos actually feels pretty satisfying. It's like jumping through hoops, only those hoops have barbs on them, and they shoot purple death magic at you if you fuck it up. Bringing up the number 9 position is Dragonkin Soldier of Nokstella. Nokstella, is that right? Nokstella? I don't give a shit. I didn't even consider the fact that Ainsel River wasn't mandatory because it had so much detail and layers to it. But in the world of Elden Ring, everything gets detail, because in Elden Ring, nothing is ever insignificant. For example, you could very easily discover one of the game's coolest bosses just chilling out somewhere in Fort far away as fuck. This is precisely the case for the Dragonkin Soldier of Nokstella, but I'm not too sure why anyone would want to skip this fight anyways. What looks like a pretty uneventful fight on the surface turns into a full-fledged Godzilla fanfiction when he throws a sorority girl tantrum and encases himself in ice lightning and starts slapping the floor. It's got that cool Slifer the Sky Dragon thing going on with its double jaw and multiple sets of teeth. This boss would have been more exciting for me personally, but I didn't find this guy until I was way over leveled and my greatsword took him into phase 2 in seconds. Downing this guy does give you one of the most important drops in the game for faith builds though, which is the Frozen Lightning Spear, a frontal attack that fans outward with incredible range and can sometimes hit twice or even 3 times depending on the size of the enemy. The Ancestor Spirit is an optional boss fight found deep in the ruins of Siofra River, which is probably one of my favorite hidden areas in the game. The fight requires lighting up 8 different braziers placed across the Siofra River banks, 2 of which took me a while to find because I wasn't sure how large the area was that they were placed in. The 8 staircase pillars light up if you've done this correctly, and the carcass of a deer at the very end of the Hallowhorn grounds starts to light up. Touch it and you'll be teleported to a pretty unforgettable looking boss that a lot of people might remember from one of the first Elden Ring trailers. Many of its attacks attacks radiate this beautiful blue glow, and its movements involve galloping across invisible platforms until it gets close to you to pounce. It definitely wasn't one of the harder fights, but the music score combined with the really cool attacks this boss has up its sleeve still made it a memorable experience for me. And I'm probably going to start a new save and make sure to remember this place during my next go around so I can fight it a bit more fairly. The Regal variant of this fight is even cooler because you get to dodge through even more attacks, and the fight doesn't end immediately because this one actually has enough HP to withstand more than 2 attacks from a greatsword. Pretty cinematic boss in my opinion. Number 7 is Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. I've been around for a while, I've watched my fair share of anime, and I've read my own load of adult fantasy novels in high school. Bloodborne was probably my favorite all-time single-player game. I've seen some shit, and I've got to say, FromSoft, you've really outdone yourselves on the boss design here. Rykard is one of the optional shard-bearing demigods in the game, and though the first phase fools you into just thinking you're fighting a giant snake, the second phase kicks in after you've brought it down, and oh my god, that's disgusting. Do we have to censor that? I don't think we have to censor. I honestly hope the voice actor for Rykard didn't genuinely damage his vocal cords during his time in the audio booth, because if so, then holy shit. You, my friend, sacrificed your voice for the thrill of the performance, and I appreciate you for doing it. It sounds bad, but like purposefully bad. It's exactly how you would expect a serpent humanoid with a sword of rotting corpses to sound. Additionally, Rykard is basically this game's Yorm the Giant because it gives you a cool weapon with only one purpose: make this boss fight feel cooler than fuck. And it works. For not a second longer than it needs to, because as soon as you kill him, the Serpent Hunter spear just runs out of gas like an old tractor and is never useful in the game again. Elemer of the Briar is that football player guy that shows up extremely late to a house party, but no one really has the balls to laugh at him when he arrives because no one feels like getting punched in the mouth. Elemer's armor and sword is wrapped in thorns, which apparently helps him out quite a bit because every hit you take from this boss feels like being in a small car accident. He's an extremely aggressive boss that slices first and asks questions never, because I'm pretty sure he's no longer capable of rational human thought, seeing as how he's currently beating the living shit out of me with the front door he ripped off a church somewhere. The attacks to watch out for are the shield charge he uses to rapidly close distance and the repeated ranged swings of his sword he controls by using the fucking Force. Are you kidding me? Well, there's no easy way out when it comes to killing Sith Lords, so don't be afraid to summon a few spirits to help you out so that the boss's attention can be a little more divided. Honestly, that's good advice for pretty much any late game boss fight that can make a meal out of your health bar in 2 quick bites. I never thought a Jedi Knight would find their way into a Souls game, but don't worry about alerting the Senate or anything because this guy actually goes down pretty quickly despite hitting like a Ford F-150. This is one of the downsides of placing a boss at a late game optional area, because there's way too high of a chance that you found a plus 18 halberd and you've leveled your character through the roof of the church this guy ripped the door off of. Up next is Loretta, Knight of the Hailgtree. Don't blame yourself for missing this one because the entire area is completely hidden from the rest of the game, and even getting there requires solving an intensely complex puzzle that involves a bunch of invisible assassins and one-shotting rooftop archers. It's a mess, honestly. It's a bit of a clusterfuck. A lot of people probably skipped over this puzzle, but I promise the payoff is worth it. Simply speaking, the Hailgtree is the archdragon peak of Elden Ring, and although Loretta doesn't quite exude the badassness of a boss like the Nameless King, the fight is still just hard enough to feel fun, and she has just enough HP to not go down immediately. Loretta is basically a souped-up tree sentinel fight with much cooler moves and a magic great bow that fires 4 arrows at once in the second phase. She starts casting much more spells during this phase, which sounds repetitive, but makes the fight twice as exciting. In case you haven't noticed, I've been playing through most of this run with an Ash of War you actually get from the Royal Knight version of this boss in Caria Manor, so I get a very deranged sense of satisfaction mastering that Ash and giving that shit right back to her. Even on a horse, it can still stun her out of most of her attacks. Sometimes she'll get you with this really weird and annoying overlap where she summons delayed glint blades and then times her next spell with when they actually launch, but the melees honestly aren't anything you haven't seen before. If you're good enough to bring her down, you get one of the coolest looking halberds I've found in the entire game, and due to magic being as OP as it is, the intelligence requirement you definitely have means you'll be able to use it right away. I'm giving one of the highest spots to a boss absolutely everyone expected to be here, which is the Rocket Man himself, Starscourge Radahn. Yeah, I know, right? Technically, he's not mandatory to beat the game if you don't give a shit about the ending you get. The boss fight starts off with an armored core kind of vibe, with you spawning a good nautical mile or two away from the boss, dodging some projectiles while gathering your army, and that quickly turns into a single-player raid boss experience that makes you feel like Irwin on his last charge. Don't feel too bad for Radahn's horse, though, because despite the 3 tons of scarlet rotted rotted man-ass he's carrying, Radahn actually learned gravity magic at an extremely young age, enabling him to be as light as a feather. If you think I'm lying, just take a look at his second phase intro where he leaps into the air like a goddamn monster hunter boss and takes out the whole desert with a fucking space comet. This was one of those moments in a boss fight where I actually was too stunned to even speak for the rest of the fight. All I could really do was watch half the entire Smash roster get wiped out by a shooting star and then just stand there like, fuck man, just kill me, you've earned it. The game taught me a good lesson here on just how broken some of the spells really are in this game. If only because his attacks have such wide arcs and little openings to them that going full melee is pretty much impossible. The only thing preventing me from putting this boss any higher is the unnecessary arrow spam at the beginning. Stop giving bosses this attack, okay? It was bullshit with Aldrich and it's bullshit now. On my number 3 spot is Malenia, Blade of Miquella. I'm starting to think equaling this area to Archdragon Peak may have been a more apt comparison than I meant it to be, because here comes the goddamn nameless king of Elden Ring herself, Malenia, the one-armed Valkyrie. All her attacks heal her for around 300 HP, so you can very easily land a barrage of spell damage only for her to heal it all right back up if you get caught in some random combo that only ends when she feels like it. So good luck trying to spirit summon anything to help you out, because all that meat shield is gonna do is charge her ass right back up to full health. She's almost too hard for me to even capture good footage for, and I don't think a lot of people want to see 5 minutes of B-roll where my career gets ended over and over again by someone who can't even be fucked to hold their sword by the grip. She can be staggered and riposted pretty easily in the first phase, so I guess if you want to summon a squad of something and slowly break her defenses down, you can. Just know that you're taking a huge risk, because one good swipe with that sword and there goes all your hard work. I've really never been a fan of how FromSoft has handled dragons in past Souls games. It feels like every dragon is given this cheap one-shot attack just because they're a dragon, and dragons are supposed to be strong, right? But ever since I saw one casting a fucking lightning stake in the release date trailer, I knew for certain that the dragons in this game were going to have some statements to make. And that dragon ended up being Lichdragon Fortissax. A full array of lightning attacks included but not limited to double-fisting lightning stake miracles and charging at you with this giant halberd that disappointingly enough can be pretty easily nullified with the good old roll spam. I wish I could enjoy the effects a little more, because all the damage it should have been doing to my character went straight to this game's frame rate. I'm gonna continue making jokes about this game's frame rate until I see a hotfix for all these stutters, by the way. When he's not attacking, he isn't that interested in, you know, moving around. This ends up being the boss's fatal flaw, in my opinion, because it makes his head a giant glaring target for sorcery spam. A lot of people that found this guy apparently chew through a good several attempts just to get to the second phase. I'm getting 1k damage from Star Shower on a fucking carrion staff that isn't even fully upgraded. Fortissax might have been the greatest boss in the game for me had it not been for this one flaw, but even then, it's just a minor nitpick if I'm being honest. I've pretty much been convinced for years that Miyazaki doesn't know how to give dragons more than 2 moves, which is Breathe Fire and Breathe Fire while flying. Dragons like Smaragd and Adula were a step in the right direction, but I genuinely didn't think the bar had anywhere left to be raised after fighting Fortissax. And here comes this boss to prove my ass wrong. Dragonlord Placidusax sounds like the name of a Yu-Gi-Oh card that got banned in regional competitions because of how broken it was. I've also noticed the subtle lore implication of every dragon having sax attached to the end of their name being able to summon Argent Energy from hell. I have no idea what that implication is, but I'm here for it. I would have sarcastically said there's some deep lore about dragons playing saxophones, but I can't imagine playing any instrument correctly if these guys don't even know how to clip their fucking fingernails. Maybe if Placidusax put as much effort into physical maintenance as he did having phases, maybe we could be training a whole dragon orchestra by the end of this. Dragonlord Placidusax has the largest attack repertoire I've ever seen on a dragon. Like, his movesets have movesets. Melee builders can whack his tail a few times before he even notices, but this is easier said than done when he's busy calling down lightning storms from the sky and the whole arena is busy being on fire. When he takes to the skies, that's your cue to watch out for a dive bomb swipe that seems to almost kill you no matter how much HP you have, so those dodge reflexes better be as pristine as they can. The soundtrack even matches the pace of the fight because you can hear the choir going nuts right as he touches back down. I've never breathed a heavier sigh of relief than when I did killing this boss. This is my personal greatest Elden Ring boss and at least top 5 secret bosses in all of Souls. I would easily put this fight right up with Midir and probably even higher if I'm being honest. And just as a last minute reminder, if you didn't see your personal favorite boss fight on the list anywhere, that's because this game is bigger than fuck and I still haven't beat it because of all the side quests I keep doing. So if you're looking for a reason I didn't mention Astel, Natural Born of the Void, or Ancient Dragon Lanciax, it's just because I didn't even run into them until after I already typed the script. So that's as good a reason as you're gonna get, honestly. I also didn't write an outro, so fuck it. Video's done. Bye.